The heat in Manila never really sleeps. Even late in the evening, the air hangs heavy, thick with car exhaust, fried food, and the sound of life stacked on top of life. Jeepneys rattled by with open doors, vendors shouted prices like music, and somewhere between the noise and the neon, three voices tried to rise above it all. Every night, they stood near a busy intersection in Quiapo. Not because it was glamorous, and not because it was safe, but because people stopped there. Red lights meant 30 seconds of attention. 30 seconds to sing. 30 seconds to hope. They were known on the street simply as the Boys. No stage name, no banner. Just three thin young men with one battered guitar, a cracked microphone plugged into a tiny speaker, and harmonies that didn't quite belong to the chaos around them. Miguel was the oldest at 23. He had the calmest voice, smooth and warm, the kind that felt like a hand on your shoulder. He worked construction during the day when he could find it. When he couldn't, he sang earlier and longer, his eyes always scanning faces, searching for something he couldn't name. Paulo was 19, skinny, restless, always tapping his foot. His voice was bright and emotional, cracking sometimes when he pushed it too hard. He dreamed out loud, constantly talking about stages, lights, and audiences that actually listened. The others teased him for it, but secretly they liked that he believed enough for all of them. Then there was Jun, 17, quiet, almost invisible until he sang. His voice was the reason people stopped. Deep, haunting, unexpectedly powerful, like it came from someone twice his size and twice his age. When Jun opened his mouth, conversations paused. Jeepney drivers turned their heads. Even the city seemed to hold its breath for a second. They didn't choose street singing because they wanted to. They chose it because it was there. Because music was the only thing they had that couldn't be taken away. Their days started early. Miguel woke before sunrise in the small room he shared with his aunt and two cousins. Paulo slept on a thin mattress in the back of his family's sari-sari store. Jun slept wherever there was space, sometimes on the floor of a neighbor's house, sometimes on a bench near the church if things were bad at home. None of them talked much about those parts. At night, they met at the same corner. They tuned the guitar by ear. They argued about song choices. Old ballads, modern pop songs, sometimes Filipino classics, sometimes English hits they practiced endlessly using borrowed phones and shaky internet connections. Most nights, they earned just enough to eat. A few coins, maybe a small bill folded carefully into the guitar case. Some nights, nothing at all. But every once in a while, magic happened. Like the night a woman in a business suit stopped in the middle of a phone call and just listened, tears sliding down her face without her noticing. Or the time a little kid started clapping completely off beat, laughing like it was the best show in the world. Or the old man who whispered, "Don't stop," before walking away and leaving more money than they made all night. Those moments kept them alive. One humid evening, after a particularly long day, Paulo said it half joking, half serious. "What if we audition for that show?" Miguel didn't need to ask which one. Everyone knew the show, the judges, the crowds, the golden buzzer that changed lives in a single moment. Jun shook his head immediately. "That's for real singers." Paulo laughed. "Bro, listen to yourself. You sound like the ground opening up." Miguel stayed quiet, staring at the traffic. He had thought about it too. More times than he admitted. The idea followed them like a shadow. At first, they laughed it off. Then they started imagining it. Then they started planning without saying they were planning. They saved money instead of eating meat. They practiced longer, even when their voices were tired. They recorded themselves on an old phone and listened back, wincing, arguing, fixing mistakes. They chose one song and committed to it, a song about struggle, hope, and rising from nothing. A song that felt like their story. The audition day came faster than they expected. The line wrapped around the building before the sun was fully up. Thousands of people, some dressed perfectly, others just as nervous and ordinary as them. The boys stood together, clutching their guitar like a lifeline. Jun barely spoke. His hands shook. Miguel put a hand on his shoulder. "We sing like we always do." Inside, the waiting room buzzed with whispers, warm-up notes, nervous laughter. When their number was called, Paulo's heart felt like it might punch its way out of his chest. The audition room was smaller than expected. No screaming crowd, just cameras, producers, and a quiet that felt heavier than any noise. They sang, not perfectly, but honestly. Their voices blended the way they always did, years of singing together shaping every harmony. Jun's deep notes sent a ripple through the room. Miguel anchored the song. Paulo soared where it mattered. When they finished, there was silence. Then one of the producers smiled. "Thank you." Outside, Paulo jumped up and down. That was it. That was the moment. Weeks passed. Then months. They almost forgot about it. Life didn't pause for dreams. They kept singing on the street. Kept surviving. Then the email came. They were going to the live auditions. The stage was massive. Blinding lights. A real audience. And 4 judges sitting behind a desk that looked impossibly far away. Simon Cowell sat in the middle, arms crossed, face unreadable. Backstage, Jun felt sick. "I can't do this." Miguel grabbed his face gently. "You already have." Their names were called. They walked out together, small against the size of the stage, Manila boys under international lights. The crowd applauded politely, curious but unsure. Simon leaned forward. "So, who are you?" Paulo swallowed. "We're street singers from Manila." A murmur rippled through the audience. Simon raised an eyebrow. "Street singers." Miguel nodded. "Yes, sir." "And why are you here?" Jun's voice came out softer than a whisper. "Because this is our only chance." Something flickered in Simon's eyes. Not sympathy. Interest. "All right," Simon said. "Show us." The music started. The first notes were gentle. Miguel's voice steady, controlled. Paulo followed, emotion spilling into every word. The audience leaned in. Then Jun sang. The reaction was immediate. Gasps. People sitting up straight. Judges glancing at each other. His voice wasn't just deep, it was full of pain, weight, history. A voice that sounded like it had lived. As the song built, the harmonies wrapped around each other, 3 lives colliding in sound. Paulo closed his eyes, singing like his future depended on it. Miguel's hands trembled but his voice never did. Jun poured everything he'd ever swallowed into those notes. By the final chorus, the audience was on its feet. The song ended. For a second, nobody moved. Then the room exploded. Cheers. Screams. Applause that felt like a wave crashing over them. Paulo covered his mouth, eyes wide. Miguel's knees went weak. Jun stood frozen, like he didn't believe he was real. Simon stood up. The crowd got louder. He didn't smile. He just looked at them, serious, focused. "I've seen a lot of acts," Simon said slowly. "And I've heard a lot of stories." The boys waited, barely breathing. "But what you have," he continued, "is not just talent. It's truth." Paulo's eyes filled with tears. "You didn't come out here polished. You didn't come out here pretending. You came out here exactly as you are." Simon turned slightly, hand hovering. "And that," he said, "is what this show is supposed to be about." The golden buzzer was hit. Gold rained down from the ceiling. The sound was deafening. The screen flashed. The crowd roared. Paulo collapsed to his knees, crying openly. Miguel covered his face, shoulders shaking. Jun looked up at the falling confetti, mouth open, tears streaming down his cheeks as if he'd finally been given permission to feel everything. They hugged each other in the middle of the stage, 3 street singers from Manila buried under gold. Later, when the lights dimmed and the noise faded, they sat backstage in stunned silence. "Did that really happen?" Paulo whispered. Miguel laughed through tears. "I think so." Jun held a piece of gold confetti in his hand like it might disappear. "I've never been anywhere like this." Their lives didn't magically become perfect overnight. There were challenges, pressure, expectations. But something had shifted forever. Back in Manila, people gathered around phones and televisions. Neighbors who had walked past them for years watched in disbelief. The corner where they used to sing felt quieter somehow, like it was waiting. They returned one night, just to sing again. No cameras, no judges, just them. A crowd formed instantly, but this time, they weren't invisible. They were still the boys. Still imperfect, still hungry for more. Only now, the world was listening.